Nou, welkom iedereen bij onze tweede lecture van het jaar. Ook dat jullie ervan gaan genieten en dat jullie ook zo meteen na de lecture nog vragen hebben voor Sander en ook meekomen naar de borrel.
Hier namens Genius bedankt voor het allemaal en ik hoop te zien er wat van. Upsteken gaan we dus een discussie over audio. En dat was het ook. Jullie zo meteen nog ons hier bij de borrel en veel plezier.
Na deze week, we hebben ook een fotograaf die gaat foto's maken en wordt ook gefilmd. En na deze week gaan we ook alles op de Google Drive zetten. En die gaan we met jullie delen via de WhatsApp-link. Dus als mensen graag de foto's en de video terug willen kijken, dan raad ik aan om even de QR-code te scannen. Oké. Nou, dan geef ik het woord aan Sander, dus een hartelijk applaus.
Very much, please.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming out on this Thursday evening. It's a little bit rainy, it's a little dreary. Thanks for spending some of your evening hours here tonight. My name is Sander van Zanten, or just Sander van Zanten, and I'm an audio director, sound designer, and a composer for video games. Now, my background is not in either of these fields. I did not study anything game-related or audio-related. So, strictly speaking, you don't need an education to get into games. But I would not at all recommend the path that I've taken because I've made it unnecessarily hard for myself. Because right here you have this safe space in which to experiment, to iterate, and to fail without repercussions. You've got excellent teachers to guide you, and the connections that you make here will prove to be invaluable in the years to come. So stay in school. It's nice. Let's see. My background in philosophy, I studied philosophy back when I was your age. Did, however, lead to a great personal connection with KOCAN founders Koen and Paul Diemet, with whom I've spent the better part of the last decade or so working on these two games, Deliver Us the Moon and Deliver Us Mars. In case you are not familiar with them, they are physically science fiction narrative adventure games. I like to think of them as odysseys in space, and it was just a blast to work on that. For those of you who aren't familiar with them, I'm just going to show the trailer to that second view, Deliver Us Mars, in order to provide a little bit of extra context before we dive into some of the fun problems that we had to deal with as we developed this game.
lo stesso.
Cool. Okay, so as part of the Keoken team, as their in-house audio designer, I got to see the very start and the very finish of each of these projects. And this is a little unique for audio folks, because usually we are brought on at a later stage of the project when a lot of stuff is already set up. But I had the unique perspective of seeing the game from the very inception right up until post-launch updates. And during that time, you get to see a lot of stuff that you don't often hear about in interviews or read about in articles. And I would like to take the time with you here tonight to go through some of the daily challenges and realities of working in-house as a designer at an indie studio that is operating in the twilight zone between indie and AA. And I think that reality is perfectly captured by the following quote by the Danish philosopher Søren Kierkegaard. At least, allegedly, he said the following: life is not a problem to be solved, but a reality to be experienced. Sounds very profound, and for most of our daily lives, this rings true. However, when you are the one who is actually creating that reality for others to experience, your life is all about solving problems. And we're gonna go and look at a couple of these problems that you don't often hear about, but which are very much a part of the actual daily reality of working on this game, or any game for that matter, for an extended period of time, from start to finish. So let's have a look at this first case study. I'm going to play a bit of a cutscene from The Live Mars. It's about halfway through the game. And in this scene, we will see a couple of audio problems that we've had to deal with, and which are also related to other areas of game development. So I'm just going to play this real quick.
I've seen anything like this.
I can't say that I have.
It's incredible. It is. What is that?
Well, whatever it is, it's important enough that they simply refer to it as the engine. It looks like it's situated in the middle of the bridge, too.
It looks active. You think there's people up there? Only one way to find out. Elevator's out.
Alright, so it looks like a straightforward cutscene with a start and an end, and surely it's not so hard to create audio for this, right? And that's fair, but still there's a number of challenges that we needed to deal with in order to pull this off. The first one of them being that, pointing in the wrong direction, where am I? Here we go. The first one of them is that gameplay Kathy is not the same as cinematic Kathy. Now, Kathy is the main character, so the astronaut that you control. She's one of the characters in this scene, and also the one that you saw walking around in the trailer just before. There are multiple versions of her. There is the gameplay version, which has all sorts of gameplay logic attached to her, and then there's the cinematic version, which is just of a higher visual fidelity and is capable of having more expressive face animations. So we kept these two separated for performance purposes mostly. But still, that leads us to a situation where potentially you as a player could see two Kathys, which is obviously not what you want. So, okay, the simple solution is we make her invisible. Great. But now, what about situations where the camera of that cutscene moves close enough to the invisible Kaki, who invisibly enough to everyone who's playing the game, is still carrying out her idle animations. So she's still interacting with her wrist computer, she's still wiping the Martian dust off her shoulders, and she's still, shifting her feet as she redistributes her weight. All these idle animations had audio triggers hooked up to them, so if the camera moved close enough, you would hear that stuff and it would just take you out of the immersion. So, okay, we needed to come up with a system that also silences characters that are invisible. Or better yet, stop animations from playing altogether on characters that are invisible. Because why would they be playing animations at all if you can't see them? You don't need it. And therefore, it would burden performance unnecessarily. And here's something important for audio. No, let me rephrase that. Here is an aspect where audio can actually help to bring to light problems that would otherwise remain invisible or unknown to you because you can't see them. They're literally invisible, such as in this case. A second thing we needed to deal with was ambience. Now, early on, we made the creative decision to champion ambience within the soundscape of our game. We wanted to emphasize the solitude of your journey and the desolation of the spaces that you traverse. So ambience was pretty present throughout most of the game's experience. However, during cutscenes, we wanted to make sure that there is plenty of room in the mix for the sound effects, music, and most importantly, the performance of the actors that are carrying out the scene. So, okay, the ambience needed to be lowered in volume a little bit. And because we used FMOD, which is an audio enter plugin in conjunction with Unreal Engine, we used so-called snapshots, which are basically temporary changes to overall volume levels, such as for ambience. So that way we could gradually and smoothly reduce the volume of ambience, gameplay ambience, as it was playing during a cinematic. And once the cinematic was over, we could bring the volume up in a smooth and gradual manner again. Now this seems like a very obvious thing to do, but it wasn't so long ago that games weren't made in this way. Instead, they would bake in the ambience into the audio files that would be played when a cinematic was triggered. So you would just trigger one audio file containing your music, your sound effects, your VO, your ambience. It was a pre-baked mix, which is nice for performance reasons, but it came with a classic problem where you would hear all the gameplay sound effects be cut off, and then the cinematic would come in. It would really interrupt the seamlessness of the experience. Now, this is a bit of an old problem, but still, it is something that over the course of the history of game audio, this is something that folks have had to deal with. Luckily, nowadays, we can just keep using our gameplay ambience. But these two are tiny, innocent problems when compared to the following, which is performance. A cursed performance. You see, when we create audio for our cutscenes, we render out a video from the Unreal sequencer in order to then import that video into our audio editing software. That way we have a very reliable timeline for us to synchronize our sound effects to, and our voiceover, and our music transitions and whatnot. We need it. It is imperative for our work in order to get that. But this is a massive spaceship where narrative and art thought it would be super awesome if you could look up from the bottom floor of the ship all the way to the top floor. And vice versa. All the way from the top floor, you would be able to see all the way down to the bottom level. But this is a massive ship, a super massive ship. And all these things you see here, all these floors, they would need to be loaded in, and we would have to render all sorts of stuff that honestly you would not even be able to see anyway. But still, it was there because we made the decision to create and design this huge atrium in the middle of the ship. Now, it's undeniably cool, but it also meant that it cost us a lot in terms of performance. So much, in fact, that when we rendered this specific cutscene from Unreal, the render was staggered. There was a significant delay. And you would not realize it when you saw the rendered video, but only after we had synchronized our audio to this render and then put it back into the game and played the cinematic in game, only then would we realize that, oh my gosh, the audio is not in sync during the second half of the cutscene. It sucked. And it took us quite a while and quite a lot of back and forth in order to figure this out, because we all thought that the render that we got from the audio sequencer was reliable. And of course, this is the most reliable and accurate way to get your timeline. But it wasn't, not in this case, because we completely choked up Unreal by pulling off this trick. So if anything, do not do stuff like this. Or do, but then deal with the consequences. And that's still fine. Now, the point of this story is not to provide a specific solution to a specific problem. That is not at all why we're here. The point is that these are some of the things that you're facing on a daily basis, stuff that you do not often read or hear about, and you may not be prepared for, but that you need to deal with anyway. The daily drudgery of technical bullshit that you need to deal with. Let's move on to a second case study. You can see the spaceship in the distance there to get a better sense of the scale and size of that thing. So imagine that in the scene just before, you would look from just where the things are protruding, that's where you would stand, basically. And you would see all the way to where it even disappears into the clouds there. It's way too massive, which should not have done yet. But it was fun. Let me just play this video. So this is from the same level. And I'll illustrate some of the audio problems that we've had to deal with here. And all of these problems are always in relationship to other disciplines of game development, which I guess is one of the other major points of this talk. Audio is very rarely an isolated thing, or should rarely be seen as an isolated thing. It is always working in conjunction with other disciplines.
I can hear you.
Cat, I can hear your voice again.
Kathy. Claire. She did.
She died.
I'm so sorry. I don't know what to say.
Please, I don't. Let's just get to those arcs and continue the mission. Please.
We just made it to the big monolith. Where are you?
I managed to salvage your rover. I'm heading to the arc now.
Good. See you soon. Cat, if you need to talk, I'm here.
No, I'll see you soon.
This working elevator underneath that will bring you right to us. Wait for you to go further. Stay safe.
Right. So there's a number of things that, from an audio perspective, we needed to deal with in order to pull this seemingly innocent thing off. But the main thing that we needed to deal with here was that Kathy is not a car. That is an unexpected problem. I did not expect to run into this problem. But Kathy is not, in fact, a car. Who would have thought? Let me illustrate this problem with a bunch of screenshots taken from the game. So, as you play the game, on the top left, you, of course, control Kathy, the astronaut. And when some dialogue is triggered, such as what we just heard in the video, it is played from, the location of her face, her helmet. That is where the audio comes from. But as soon as you enter the car, we give players the illusion that Kathy indeed enters the car and that she drives off into the sunset with that vehicle. But what is in fact happening is that Kathy remains stationary on the position where she was when you pressed F to get into the car. And that means that if at that same moment dialogue is triggered, and you would drive away, you would hear yourself driving away from yourself, which is a completely bizarre out-of-body experience, which did not work, of course. So, how do you deal with this? We dealt with this using so-called transceivers. Transceivers are a very nifty tool that you can use in Fmod in order to either transmit or receive audio, hence the name transceivers. And they allowed us to do this very nifty thing where the audio, the VO that was originally triggered from Kathy, and therefore which was playing on her own location, we make sure that we could then transmit that audio and then be received by another sound source which was playing on the actual car. So even though the voiceover was still playing from this position, you would not hear it from this position anymore. You would hear it from the location of where you were driving the car. And this allowed us to solve a number of other problems too. And I think, yes, I've got a video to illustrate some more issues with these. And by the way, I call these things problems as though they are a nuisance and it sucks, but not at all. These are all just mostly fun and technical puzzles just waiting for you to solve them. And it's important that you solve them, and the better you get at solving them, the more time you have to actually create the cool story you want to tell, the awesome game mechanics that you want to implement, and the greatest art that you want to immerse players in. Anyway, another use case of transceivers in this here short video.
I don't know what to say.
Please, let's not. I don't. Let's just get to those arcs and continue the mission. Please.
So it's the same scene, it's the same level, only this time I decided to get out of the car before the dialogue had ended. And that meant that we hear Kathy's voice change. Because now she is no longer in the car, she never was in the car, but we made it sound as though she was in a safe environment. So at first her voice was clean and unprocessed. But as soon as she gets out of the car, or rather when you press F to exit the car, and Kathy is teleported to the side or the rear of the car, we now apply some processing to her voice in order to really make it feel like, okay, she's got her helmet on and the visor down, because she's no longer in the safe confines of her car. She's now outside on Mars again, and therefore needs to wear her helmet. So let me just show this real quickly again, because it's just such a short video.
I don't know what to say.
Please, let's not. I don't.
Clean?
Let's just get to those arcs and continue the mission. Please.
And then there's the in-helmet processing, so a little bit of filtering, a little bit of convolution reverb, maybe a bit of distortion. And we use transceivers again to make this happen, because the VO that we triggered from Kathy was first routed into a separate audio group where we applied the processing before returning the processed signal back to Kathy. And by doing it in this way, we found ourselves a scalable manner so that we did not have to do this for individual events. We could just set up one system that would work for every voiceover event that we would trigger from here on out. Now, transceivers are so cool, in fact, that later on in this level, there was another use case for them. And this one is an excellent example of how sometimes audio can help build bridges between seemingly incompatible goals from other departments. So for example, this game is very narrative heavy. And we had as one of our goals that we want players to feel the deep connection between different characters. We want them to be emotionally engaged. So okay, awesome. But that in practice oftentimes leads to lengthy conversations, lengthy dialogue. Okay, we can live with that. But from a game design perspective, we were not at all enthusiastic about having to freeze players into place while a dialogue was being played, because you wanna go out, you wanna explore, you wanna do stuff, and not sit and wait for a minute before you can walk around again. So how can we bring these two things together? Because if you don't, you end up in a situation where a conversation is happening, but the conversation partners aren't even close to each other anymore because the player just ran away. And now both the NPC and the player are babbling into nothing, and it doesn't make sense anymore. So again, we use transceivers, but this time we did not use it to process Kathy's signal. This time we use it to process the signal of the NPC that she's talking to. in order to make it appear as though they are now talking over the radio as you move too far away from them.
You okay with smoothing up? Might be quicker that way. Hopefully.
Yeah, sure.
So, we're looking for pregabalin, gabapentin,
I particularly. Or anything with the word tag, propulsive or narcotic analgesic on it.
Right? So there's a couple of stuff that's happening here. First of all, as soon as you turn away from Ryan, that's the guy she's talking to, we immediately apply some more reverb on his voice. We filter some of his voice because you're no longer focusing your gaze upon him. Because just like in real life, as soon as you turn away from something, you just hear things differently. But also, more importantly, as soon as you walk away too far from him, you would no longer be able to hear it, because the attenuation range is such that if you move away 20, 30 meters, it's just too soft, the body. And at that point, we activate the radio, the in-helmet radio that Kathy wears. And now Ryan starts to come in over the radio in order to resume the conversation. And in doing so, we were in a fortunate position as audio designers to help build this bridge between these two, at first sight, incompatible wishes from two different departments within the team. Now, so far, I've mostly dealt with audio-related things, but really, as you're part of an... I see a raised finger.
Yeah, I wondered, because I heard the audio, when you move too far away a certain point, you also hear his voice. And also the radio.
Yeah.
Is that two different audio clips that the same three? Or is it?
It's the same clip. So there's still just one sound file being played, and it's being played from the original position, so from the NPC's location. And so I'm not sure if you could hear it over the speakers, but you could subtly still hear it from there.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are also transmitting that same signal, which is then being received on another channel, namely the one that is playing on your own location. And we did this in some other scenarios as well. So for example, in another level, you are scuba diving with your father, and obviously you don't really hear people talking on the water, so all the dialogue that happens there is transmitted over the radio. But if you move really close to him, you can also hear like the very muffled and filtered sound of him talking. And it's still just one sound file being played. It's just that we distribute and transmit that signal over multiple channels. Cool. So in addition to some audio problems, when you're part of the in-house team, you get to see all sorts of wacky stuff, especially when you see a game from its very beginnings to the very end. So I want to take you to a Friday night, sometime in late 2021. It's 10 p.m. We're all ready to go home, but it's also milestone delivery night, and we got to submit our latest builds to our publisher. And this is important because we get paid if we deliver a build, and it's good to get paid. So we download the latest build from our server, we unzip it, we extract it, we fire up the build, and we are greeted by the following monstrosity. Wow. It's stuff like nightmares. What happened here, and I still don't understand how this happened or why this happened, but her face was stitched upon her torso. So instead of wearing clothes, she was wearing her own face. And this just broke us. It was late at night and we were ready to go home, and this happened? What the hell? Okay, let me take you into the realm of animation for a second on the topic of weird stuff that happens. Not sure if you can read the timestamp on the bottom right of the screen, but we caught this 2 weeks before release.
Whoa.
What? Completely and utterly bizarre. And while you were playing the game, you would never see this. If you were playing the game, you would only see a subtle flash for like 1 frame, a flash, and you wouldn't know what was happening. So QA from our publisher, they came back with reports that were like, we see something flashy happening, but we don't know what's going on. Can you look into it? And we thought, whatever, it's not that big a deal. But then we looked into it slightly before release, shortly before release, and we realized, oh shit, what? How, what's going on here? This is weird. I didn't even know how to explain this. But something similar happened here, which is what we called Cathosaurus Rex, because of her tiny forearms. And over time, her face evolved into one of her favorite Slack emojis. It's just so good. But all crazy stuff aside, it's still important to deliver your milestone builds because you get paid if you deliver a good build. And that is why we did not go home at 10 p.m. that night. We needed to fix the face that was stitched upon her torso. Now, I imagine most of us will be on the developer side of things in our careers, and not so much on the publisher side of things. And so it is easy in situations like this, or tempting, to fall into an us versus them kind of scenario when we're talking about publishers. But the reality of things is that you need each other, and in a healthy relationship with your publisher, you need each other in order to survive, and you need to enable each other in order to make that happen. Now, how do you enable your publisher? You enable your publisher by respecting your build. Respecting the build. Now, what does it mean to respect the build? Respecting the build means not pushing any last-minute changes to your game. It means communicating your changes to your teammates. And it means checking and verifying everything that you do in an actual build. Because sometimes stuff just works differently in editor than it does in a build. In fact, there was one milestone where halfway through the game, we encountered a blocker, but it only occurred in a shipping build, which completely sucked because now we couldn't use our dev tools in order to cheat our way to this very specific location. No, we needed to go through the first 3 levels before we could try to recreate the bug again. Horrible. So make sure to test these things on time because you don't want to test them out on a Friday night at 11 p.m. So respect the build, because it is really the only way for your publisher to measure the progress that you are making during a multi-year project. They need to know at certain times how you're coming along, how the game is coming along, and how you're doing. Not just because they wanna screw you or they wanna be stingy with money. It's also because they need to know how they can best help you. Do you need more outsourcing? Do you need more service providers? Do we need to move up our marketing deadlines? Do you need some extra money maybe? Would be nice. But along with the build, there's also a lot of documentation that you can use to keep them updated. So your milestone reports, your budget updates, your risk assessments, velocity graphs, overviews of your open issues on your backlog or your bug tracking platform. These are all important to send along, especially as you start to work towards a console release. Because consoles have some additional requirements compared to a normal PC release. And these fall roughly into 2 categories. The first of them being plain and simple platform requirements. So whether it's PlayStation or Xbox or Nintendo, they all have their set of rules and regulations that you need to adhere to if you want to publish your game on their platform. And some of these make total sense, such as if you're loading something and you have faded to black, you faded the game to black for a moment in order to load some stuff, that's cool. But if it takes longer than X amount of seconds, you need to add a loading indicator on there so that players know that stuff is being loaded and that the game hasn't frozen or crashed or what have you. So that one makes sense. But also there's some oddly specific stuff, such as when you interact with a button, it needs to be called press or push or either one of these things. Oddly specific. I don't know why they insist on this. But sometimes they do. But other than that, and more importantly, there are hardware requirements, because obviously your game needs to run smoothly and well enough on the target platform. And especially now that the new generation of consoles has been out for a couple of years. The last generation, so PS4 and Xbox One, they are becoming weaker and weaker, comparatively speaking, by the day, and becomes harder to get your modern day game running on these platforms because it's such a hassle to deal with their CPU and memory limitations. So for the final part of this talk, I want to go into performance for a little bit. Performance. Now, what is performance? I'm sure, because most of you folks are from the games department, I heard. So I'm pretty sure that most of you know what performance is all about. But if not, I once had it described to me as death by 1,000 cuts. Super poetic. Tom Lohman told me this. He is an Unreal Engine veteran. You might know him from his excellent Unreal Engine C++ courses. Also, he's an excellent guy. And he told me this. Performance is death by 1,000 cuts. Now, what does that mean? It means that every sound file that we add, every little texture that we add, every animation, every extra bit of code that we add in order to make our mechanics even cooler, it all comes at the cost of a little bit of extra CPU or memory. And, you know, one thing is okay, 2 things are okay, 100 things are okay, but we are talking about tens of thousands of things that we need to manage in at any given point within a game. And at that point, you better make sure that your things are optimized right. Otherwise, it is indeed death by 1,000 cuts. Because usually when you optimize your game, it's rare, it's a very rare thing that you find 1 or 2 things that if you slash them, your performance is totally fine. Usually it is only when you start to optimize a lot of things that the gains start to become clear and apparent. So, how do we handle performance? It's basically it's 2 sides of the same coin. First of all, knowledge is power, so we first need information to know what it is that we need to deal with. Are we dealing with a CPU bottleneck? Or are we running out of memory? We need to know before we can actually make a targeted effort to fix what's happened. And that is the other side of the coin, optimization. So let me show you some pictures of how audio optimization, of what that looks like. I've got some of the screenshots here haphazardly organized from the FMOD profiler, which you can hook up to a build running on either your own PC or any device really that is connected to the same network as the computer where you're running FMOD Studio. So on the top right, we see this blue bar that keeps growing and growing and growing. And I'm not sure if you can read it, but by, 9 seconds in on the timeline, apparently we've loaded in 1.5 gigabytes of audio into memory. That is absurd. You never need that. So this was a clear sign for us that, okay, apparently this out-of-memory crash that we're running into on PlayStation 4 probably caused by audio here. So let's look into the way that we load in audio, because there's obviously an issue here. Now the one below that is CPU graph, and this it almost reaches the top end of the track, which basically means there is trouble. CPU or audio performance in terms of CPU is often measured in a percentage, not in megabytes or gigabytes in that extreme situation, but in percentages. And basically what that means, or what it measures, is it measures the time that your audio engine needs in order to render the next few bits of audio within the amount of time it has to render these next few bits. And basically, if the measured CPU exceeds 100%, you're basically going to experience stuttering and audible buffering, and that just sounds crappy, so you don't want that. So as soon as we saw this, we realized, okay, we gotta optimize the performance in terms of CPU of some of our events. Now, what we see here, all these gray dots and lines, these are all representations of sound event instances. So a dot indicates the start of an audio event, and the gray line represents the continued lifespan of that event. And when the gray line ends, so too does the lifespan of an event. Now that's important because the more instances you have of an event, generally also the more voices you have, and these are all correlated with how much CPU your audio engine is pulling. So on the left, you see more about instances, more about voices, more about memory and sample stuff, but basically more of the same. So okay, now you have a bit of a grip on how much memory your game or your game's audio is requesting, how your CPU is doing. So how do you move on? How do you improve this then? Now there's a couple of things that you can do to improve the performance of your audio. First of all, you gotta limit your voices. Every individual track that you play in a sound event is basically an individual voice. At least that's the way that FMOD works. And that means that if you're like me and you think that it's cool to design a rocket sound out of 30 layers, that means that that is 30 individual voices that you need to deal with. That's cool during the design phase of a project, but once the timing and order of things is locked down during a later point of the project and nothing is really changing anymore, that's when you can really start to consolidate some of these tracks to record their output and just put them into one sound file. So that ironically, you might end up with more sound files, so a bigger total file size, but less CPU cost. And sometimes you need to make that, that trade-off. Limiting your event instances is also an effective way of limiting the CPU cost of your audio. So for example, do you really need to have 20 instances of your footsteps? Probably not. You can probably get away with some stealing and set the max amount of instances to say 4. And to just return to the last slide for a little bit, this graph that shows the event lifespans is also a very great way of detecting events that you cannot hear or see because they are so far away, but which will still cost some CPU just by the sheer fact that they exist. And you don't know that they exist until you profile and you see, oh my gosh, this looping door sound effect was never stopped properly, and now even though the player character is on the other end of the level, that door is still emitting sound and still hassling CPU. That sucks. We got to deal with that. So event instances. Then there is effects. Notoriously, convolution reverb asks for a lot of CPU, and you can optimize this by cutting the tail a little bit. Pitch shifting is the usual suspect when looking for CPU gains in your audio performance. But also, what is less often talked about is that not all equalizers are made equal, ironically enough. So some equalizers are better or more efficient at processing the incoming audio than other equalizers. And this becomes especially important once you start to work with surround sound, because every channel is processed individually. Now that's on the memory side of things, sorry, the CPU side of things. But from the memory side of things, you can think about, okay, how do I split up my audio assets into distinct audio banks? So do I really need the sounds that are playing in level 5 in the audio bank of level 7? No, not at all. So you keep them out of that bank. But you can also think about, how do I load these samples into memory? Do I fully load them into memory so that when I need them, they're there and I don't have any delay? Or is it okay if I stream these assets into memory? Which means that if I want to hear them, they will be slightly delayed, so they will not be in sync tightly with other things going on in the game. But it comes at just a fraction of the memory load compared to just loading that complete asset into memory. So for example, if you have a 3-minute music track or a 2-minute ambience loop, these are all pretty hefty files for you to load into memory completely. So instead, what you can do is stream them into memory, which basically means that you load in just a fraction of the full audio file and unload it once the playhead cursor has passed that point. So you just load in a tiny portion of the sound file at the same time. Now, I want to give a final shout out before we wrap up to FMOD's live update functionality. Live update is the sickest thing imaginable. So all the data that you see in this graph was recorded by connecting the FMOD profiler to a build that's running on either my own PC or a laptop that we brought in that is now 15 years old, or it could be one of the PlayStation dev kits that we had at the office. But the beautiful thing about Live Update is that it is actually a two-way street. So it is not just a manner of, or a method of gaining knowledge and gaining information based on which you can troubleshoot bugs or optimize your performance. It also goes the other way, which means that you can make tweaks to the audio in a build that is running on a different computer. Super magical, because now we can prevent situations where situations such as this. You play the game on your PlayStation 4, you measure the performance, you see there's problems that I need to deal with, and you make an estimated and educated guess about what it is that you need to do. You make the changes, you push the changes to source control, you then build, you create a build on your server, you download the build from the server onto your PlayStation 4, you install the build on your PlayStation 4, and only then can you test and measure the effect of your performance tweaks. But by now, you're already 1 or 1.5 hours later, and maybe your mind is at a different place right now, and if nothing else, it just costs you a lot of time. Using Live Update, you can make tweaks to the game's audio while the build is running, and you can measure the impact on performance live, which is the most magical thing, really. So you can exclude tracks, you can exclude events, effects on a per platform basis. It's truly cool. Now, if you've managed to keep your performance in check, if you've maintained a good relationship with your publisher, and if you've somehow managed to solve as many technical problems as possible within the finite amount of time and money that you have to create your game, you might just end up with something really cool. And that's all I have to say for now. So thank you very much, and Is there time for QA, or do I go to the bar? Q&A. Okay, there is time for QA. That's cool. Yes?
Yeah, you said something earlier about syncing to like a video that you made with Unreal.
Yeah.
Can you like stream the video to F mode so you can actually see and hear what it would look like and sound like at the same time?
Right. Well, what you can do is you can trigger F1 events from your Unreal sequencer timeline. So that is one way of doing that. But when you need to manage dozens, if not hundreds, of individual footstep sounds, and you want to have more control over how exactly they sound, because of distance to camera, or because you want a different perceptual experience of the sound, then all these things just make it more practical to edit the audio for a cinematic in your actual audio editing software. And so what you get is the unholy trinity between 1, Unreal, 2, FMOD, or Wise, your audio engine, and 3, your audio editing software. And FMOD does not support the importing of the video files, but you would not really want that anyway, because you can't really, well, you can use your gameplay sound events during cinematics. That's totally fine for a lot of cases. But when you want to have more control over the details of the soundscape, of the mix during a cinematic, then you oftentimes cannot rely on the same events that you use during gameplay. Because, for example, during gameplay, the attenuation range of footsteps might be 10 meters, for example. But maybe during a cinematic, we want to emphasize the emptiness of the space by hearing distant footsteps. And that means that we cannot use the same footstep events. And sure, we can make different events that have just a larger attenuation range, but it just means that you keep on adding and adding more individual events, and it just becomes a mess to maintain and manage. So we render videos. Yeah. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome, cool.
Were there any considerations made in choosing Fmod as middleware over others like Wise?
Right. There was a historical reason for us to keep using Fmod here, and that is that we also used it for the first game, Deliver Us the Moon, which meant that we had already created a number of systems that worked really well with Fmod. It meant that our team was already experienced, and not just our audio designers, but also our programmers or our level designers, they already knew what to expect from audio that was handed over to them, or, well, actually we never really hand over audio, we just work together with them. But it's really a blessing to have a foundation to work on as you start with a new project. Now, as for the first game, that is when we were in a position to make that decision between, okay, do we want to use Fmod or Wise? And honestly, I was just starting out at the time, and someone I looked up to said that Fmod was more user-friendly to begin with. So that's what I started out with. Turned out it's a super powerful tool, so I still like to use it. But Wise or Fmod, both of them are excellent, excellent tools.
James. Since you said that you didn't have a background in anything games or audio related, what was the step between how did you get there?
Right. Through sheer force of will, I really, really, really wanted to do this. So after my studies in philosophy, I did some side gigs, but over the course of the next few years that followed, I realized, wait, the words in my head are really replaced by music over time. So I think I better listen to that, otherwise I'm going to be a miserable human being. So I pursued that, and I effectively became a hermit for the better part of the year that followed, as I was just trying to learn to listen and figure out how to create music in a manner that makes sense for games. How do I produce music in the first place? I've always loved music and audio and games since an early age, but I've never, up until that point, I'd never pursued it seriously. And in the years that followed, I severely missed the very environment and ecosystem that you folks have here. Because like I said at the start, you have such awesome resources here. And sometimes when you're in the here and now, it may not feel like it is a very special thing, but it is super, super special, your education. Yeah. It's a long journey, and we can talk more about that over grades.
Sure.
Have you ever tried to render audio not in real time? So not as things were happening, but maybe you would have a variable cutscene or something, and you want certain effects, and you know beforehand what parameters your text need to have, but you render out one audio file?
Wait, so do you mean, do we generate audio in real time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or not in real time, like beforehand. So I'm making a music production app, and I want to like instantly have an MP3 of something that they made in the game.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Could you do that with Fmod?
I think so, but you would need to dig into the more low-level code. So it is not a feature that is actually, it used to be a feature in an ancient version of Fmod. Nowadays it's called Fmod Studio, but before that you had Fmod Designer or something, I think. But that was phased out a number of years ago. But that had a function for you to just render out, or just print the audio that was playing in an event. And you don't have that anymore, at least not in like the basic set of features. But I'm pretty sure that if you dig deep enough, there is a way to do this, because you are also able to hook up in-game communication or microphone input. So there has to be a way to capture audio. Pretty sure. I'm not able to tell you why, I'm sorry, but I think it is awesome.
Cool.
How big was the audio team for the delivery games, and how did collaboration go between the different audio roles?
Oh, cool. For the first game, it was just me. On music, sound, implementation, feel, all the things. On the second game, I was fortunate enough to be joined by Bas Bertran, who is an HKU alumnus, by the way, and who heads up the audio team over at Quick Games nowadays. Truly a phenomenal audio designer and an excellent human being. Over time, our roles naturally shifted towards, well, I would do music because I already did the music for the first game, so that seemed like a natural thing to do. But together, we managed basically everything that came our way, whether it was sound design, localization, VO, systems. He worked on a lot of systems and did more of the heavy lifting on the sound design part of the project, and I did more on the music side of things. But more importantly, on the direction and organization side of things, because over the course of Delivers Mars, the total team grew to about 30 to 40 people, including freelancers. So there was just a lot of talking that needed to be done to make sure that everybody's noses were pointed to the right direction, or into the right direction.
Now I have a question about VO. Like, how did you approach that? Because I'm guessing you outsourced most of the recording. How did you, like, direction-wise, and then giving feedback on that part? How did you approach that?
Oh, cool. There's actually a slide in the presentation that I skipped. I'm just going to pull it up real quick because it sort of deals with this. You can see this. Great. Sweet. Okay, this is our performance capture stage. This was at Centroid in London, where we recorded performance capture. Actually, let me also show the second slide because it's so cool. Look at this. We had zero gravity scenes in the game, so in order to pull it off, we would need to put our actors on chairs with wheels, and there was somebody just out of the screen who was pulling a rope attached to the chair so that we could make it look as though she were floating in zero gravity. But now the way that we did that is that usually when you do performance capture, you run into a lot of acoustic issues because usually the room is pretty big because of all the cameras that need to be mounted depending on your performance capture solution. But our audio recording partner, Molenaar, also in London, they partnered up with Centroid on this project, and they when we were getting ready to record performance capture, they were getting ready to have a room that was sort of acoustically okay. So as you can see, it's really just a bunch of drapes. And maybe they did some stuff on the ceiling. But either way, it was good enough. Because we really wanted to be able to use the performance captured VO instead of having to go back into the studio and re-record the VO, because you're never going to get the exact same performance and it's never going to sound as great. I was not there personally. I was only involved with the preparations for this specific bit, but we did have some people on site in order to make sure that everything was carried out correctly. When we did voiceover recordings, so for the in-game dialogue that did not require animations to be recorded, that is when I and the writer or narrative director flew over to Molenaar's studio, and we were there on site to help direct the actors and get the most out of their performance in Frag stock. Yeah. I hope that answered your question. Yes.
You said that often the audio team gets brought on later in development. What did you get to do, like in the stage before audio would normally be brought on? Did you get a head start on the audio, or did you do something else?
It's actually one of my favorite parts. No, actually every part of the project is my favorite part because things change all the time, and I love that. But usually what happens, or traditionally, it doesn't happen as much anymore, thankfully, but in a traditional manner of collaboration, and you still see this in the movie industry, for example, is that audio is brought on near the later part of the project, and they're only brought on to provide audio files. But this presupposes the existence of audio systems already. And so before the time where you really need to pump out a lot of audio asset, you get to spend a lot of time thinking about designing and implementing the systems that you need in order to drive your audio effectively. So that is one thing. And also you're there to help other departments figure out their problems. So the example I gave with the voiceover, for example, with the distance where the voiceover of the NPC would now come in over your helmet. These are things that usually would require just a thought process of an audio designer, someone who knows the audio tools, in order to come up with a solution like that. Because much like I don't know what kinds of solutions a narrative designer or a gameplay designer could come up with simply because it is not my craft, so too is it harder for them to imagine the ways in which audio can help their problems. So it's all about creating opportunities for synergy, really. And sure, you don't need to spend all your time in audio. I was then also very much involved with narrative, with early gameplay prototypes. We were a pretty small team when we started out on the Libros Mars, and that meant that everybody just got to participate in a lot of awesome design discussions. There was a time that I suggested that we made this game a real-time strategy game. No joke. We did an RTS prototype. It didn't work. All right. Any other questions? Now let's get some bricks. No, there's one more question.
One more. Do you have something like automated unit tests to check the build? Because that's such an important part.
We did do some automated testing, not as much as we would have liked. But near the end of the project, we finally set up something that would allow us to automate some testing. But honestly, not nearly enough.
And is that also music related or just like build stability, graphic?
Mostly build stability. So do we run into a crash somewhere? That is the kind of stuff that we'd be able to track. But blockers caused by unusual player interactions or just general dumbassery during gameplay, these were a little trickier to catch. So we found ourselves playing the game every week anyway, in order to catch these things, and preferably in a shipping build uploaded to a closed soft environment on Steam. But I would have loved to do more of that. And in next projects, I'll definitely push more on that, because at some point you just get sick of playing your own game.
From the earlier, so that's built in more different easy to play.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. All right.
Yes.
No more questions? I see some more hands in this. Are we guys cool or?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, was there anything you did in the first game that in the second you're like, okay, I'm not doing that again?
Yes. As a lot of audio designers, I was a huge fan of reverb, and I would just slap reverb on everything. A lot of reverb. It was just crazy amounts of reverb. You would not be able to hear everything properly. So in the second game, especially when Buzz came on the team, I was like, yeah, I love reverb. Let's keep doing this. And he was like, nah, man, it's too much. Just don't do it. So we pulled down on a lot of reverb. And I'm thankful that he said that, because it is much better. Right. Yeah. And also we tried to have more opportunities for silence in terms of music. I won't say that we 100% succeeded in doing that, but in the first game there was just music playing all the time. And now in the second game there was more of an ebb and flow of the musical palette, and that just makes for more contrast. And as everything in life, contrast creates meaning and significance. So I always try to push for that.
Now, curious, since you mentioned that it happened twice, does it happen very often that, like, right before you have to upload a video, suddenly something that didn't seem to exist before just suddenly happens, like some very huge error like that?
Yeah, it happens. Yeah, and sometimes they did not exist before, and they are caused by a seemingly innocent change pushed by somebody on a late Friday afternoon. These are the worst. But sometimes it's also just something that happens only in a shipping build, halfway through the game, and who has the time to play through a shipping build?
How do they only happen in the shipping builds? Like hard?
Yeah, well, I have a very specific example of that. So during an earlier part of the development process, we were still in the process of setting up one of our gameplay mechanics, which is a laser cutting tool. And we just, once you activated it, a laser beam would just be emitted from your wrist tool. Cool. But we didn't have VFX for that yet, so instead we used debug traces in order to see what it is that you were pointing at, and in order to make sure that you saw what was going on. But of course, debug traces don't work in the chicken build, because they're part of the development tool kit within Unreal. So once we started to play the game in a shipping build, we realized, wait, we don't see what's going on, and when you cannot see what's going on, it's super duper hard in this case to know what it is that you're aiming at. And so it was a perceived blocker, not so much a crash, but yeah, it is again it's a super dumb example, but you run into super dumb shit as you go through the infant stages of a project all the way up to at the end.
Well, if there are no more questions, then we would like to thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. We too would like to stay a little bit here. Within a few minutes, we're going to the Stamkroeg for a little bit. Good. Stay around.